Item number 19. Thank you, guys. Sorry, generic guys. Item number 20 is the Land Use Recovery Plan, the Riccarton Racecourse Champions Mile development. Mike, is this you? They've deserted you. Okay, thank you. This has actually been through a committee, hasn't it?
Yes.
It came through your committee, Andrew.
So the reason it's here, Madam Chair, is that this came to the Strategy and Finance Committee last week, and the committee approved this. But because we have to send a signal to the government or to the Ministry of Earth Recovery by after the 1st of December, that's why it's come alone to this council meeting for consideration.
So it went through, was it strategy? Yeah. Okay, so moved Andrew, seconded Jimmy.
Especially item 2 here, particularly emphasize the high quality, safe, accessible residential environment, address neighborhood context, and also the item 5, affordable housing. At the moment still unknown, so I'm not sure. You explain.
That's correct. I mean, it hasn't changed since the advice that we gave you last week, which was they are matters that aren't unknown there, and which is why we're not adopting this or giving it full approval as an exemplar. We're basically effectively sending the signal that in some areas they're good and we're prepared to look at them as an exemplar. In some areas there's opportunity for further dialogue. It really places the ball back into Ngāi Tahu's court. If they wish to continue to pursue this, it sends a strong signal they've got some continued work to do in this before council will consider it further.
Okay, thank you. This was moved, Andrew seconded Jimmy. Is that right, Jimmy? No, it wasn't. Oh, I will. I'm happy to. Phil, yep. Okay, Yanni.
On page 437, I just want to take you to the panel finding, which is, in summary, the panel concluded that the submission sets out a development proposal which has the potential to deliver a positive evolution of traditional land subdivision. However, at a detailed level, the proposal was unable to present compelling practical evidence, particularly in the detailed layout provided, that aspects of the development, including affordability, diversity, innovation, livability, and community integration, would be delivered in accordance with the exemplar criteria. And then it goes on to talk about why it doesn't support it, and then says at a more general level, the panel highlighted that significant information gaps left them struggling to make a leap of faith that particular elements would be delivered. Given that that was the view of the panel, why are you asking that we approve it, a qualified approval, given that there doesn't seem to be much evidence that this is meeting the exemplar criteria?
Well, I think that the panel made its evaluation, and we've made our evaluation, and I think it was summed up by the Mayor as the chair of the committee last week, that this is really about actually continuing to recognise where people are doing some good things and encouraging them to do better. There is no absolute in the exemplar process. They're going to be different in all those circumstances. So I think on balance we felt that it was worth continuing to remain engaged with Ngāi Tahu to continue to foster that development through its process. So as I said in response to Councillor Chen's question, it may come that they may choose to say, actually, we're not prepared to do anything more, and it won't proceed under the exemplar model, and the report recognises there are other options for them. But I think as a committee, well, certainly as staff and then as the committee, you felt that it was appropriate to continue to work with them towards that outcome.
So I guess just supplementary, I'm really struggling to understand, I guess, the purpose of exemplar projects that aren't exemplar, that are being asked to get qualified approval. I don't see what would be different, and not approving it as giving it qualified approval for energy efficiency, density, locality and showcasing, as to why they couldn't continue working through trying to meet all of the exemplar objectives. Like, why do they need a qualified approval now as opposed to just going away and doing more work, given that there is such a high degree of concern from the technical people?
Well, we're required to give a response back to the Minister.
By the 19th of December.
Sorry, yeah, by the 19th of December. So, again, it comes down to that balance. Are we going to say, we don't believe we can say fully yes. We believe we consider that on balance it's better to continue to work with them to try and encourage them to get to that place. But I would also comment that actually there is no perfect exemplar. We don't know. The exemplar process is a learning process for everybody, and not every exemplar is going to look the same or meet the same outcomes. So we've got one model with Straydon Lodge. We're trying to work through, and we've had this discussion, other models with Housing New Zealand. We've got our own properties as well. So each of them is going to look different and have a slightly different, achieve different levels of outcome. The whole reason we had the multi-criteria analysis was we recognised not every aspect of every development was going to be perfect. So it is a bit of a learning exercise for us and the industry as well.
It's not going to be perfect and it's a learning as you go. However, there are definite criteria, and some of the really, really basic criteria around the exemplar projects involves affordability, innovation and quality, as well as some of the other issues that are raised in here. And to be perfectly frank, there's nothing around those areas that seems to actually tick the boxes. And when we read, whilst tried and tested, this model has struggled to manage how the types of home and living environments eventually created by third-party house builders not bound by exemplar requirements would deliver the overarching aims around affordability, innovation and the quality, and there's, those are the main things. So look, I totally understand what Councillor Johansson is saying. I do have a question. My question is, do you feel, being so far from ticking all those boxes at the moment, there would be a chance to close the gap? Or, to me it just seems so huge at the moment, the gap. Do you feel that gap could close and we could actually tick some of those key boxes?
Well, I think, as I said previously, this really places the ball back into Ngāi Tahu's court. If anyone is large enough and, I suppose, a significant enough developer to get across the line if they choose to, it's Ngāi Tahu.
But is there a willingness from them, do you think?
I think there's been a willingness thus far, and perhaps this is part of the continued exploratory program we have with them to see how far they are going to be willing. As I said, this is not. Every one of these is a new learning curve for us, and I suppose we're trying to find the balance between actually saying yes, we want to make some strategic gains, versus, I suppose, saying actually no, we've got a very hard and fast set of criteria. You don't meet them, we're not here. And the option for them is to, as it says in the report, to simply go down and deliver a quote-unquote bog standard subdivision. What they've proposed here is far from a bog standard subdivision. What we're trying to do is, through this process, actually get them to commit to even more.
Could I ask a potentially mean question, and you can rule me out and say that's not fair, Glenn, if you want, but I'll try it out. What I'm thinking is, do you think the bar is higher for, say, us as council to have to deliver on time? And, as you know, we're determined to do that. I see there's a time constraint, 19th December, but if this was us in that position, would that be acceptable?
So we've already...
Right, okay, well that's why I thought I'd better, okay, don't worry about it, that's... Okay. Yeah, no, that's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this one too. I don't think it could be called an exemplar, and my question is really more, what activities are they undertaking that are anything to do with exemplar? Can you nominate any apart from a stormwater swale? Everything that we see that they've left out, to me, is part of it. As Yanni read them out before, and Ali did affordability, diversity, innovation, livability, community integration, and they're ignoring the potential for a positive evolution, which is what we're really aiming for with exemplars, to move forward in a different way. So without wanting to hold it up, we can't call it an exemplar. I don't feel comfortable with that.
Well, I don't think we are calling it an exemplar at this point.
Okay.
I think we're sort of giving I suppose, a partial nod to the things they have done and inviting them.
Nod.
Well, it's a qualified approval, so it's not an approval as an exemplar. It's saying that they are along the path. They're not necessarily there, but equally, as we know with the other projects we're in, that is an evolutionary process and an iterative process in itself. We believe there's continued merit to keep working and to keep providing the opportunity for Ngāi Tahu to come and demonstrate what they can do in those spaces. The other option, which is councils at the moment, is to say, actually, we don't believe that they have a chance of doing so, and therefore we won't support that qualification. But I think the recommendation from staff to the committee and the committee's recommendation to council is we believe on balance is merit in continuing to engage with them.
I just say, as I read it, here is an area of land that has could sustain a great deal of housing. We either have a choice, as I read this, we either work with them to try to create an exemplar which creates a good living environment, or they can, if they choose, not become an exemplar and just apply through the normal RMA procedures to do a standard subdivision. Of those two, I would prefer that we worked with any developer actually to achieve really good community outcomes. And I appreciate we're not all of the way there, but I saw a pre-working with the council proposal for a different area, and then a post-working with the council, and the difference was actually very positive. So in this case, what I'm expecting is that there will be a positive outcome to this engagement process with Ngāi Tahu property. And I would much rather that we did that rather than just left them to go and subdivide.
Yes, but where do we sit on 6.2 then? I mean, the wording there does not fit.
So we're not there, and so this is a first step, and working with you to take the next steps as I read what you're suggesting. Phil?
In a sense, I think we're into the debate part because people have asked the questions, and I just want to explain why at the committee level I certainly supported this. And when I think about why it's being done in terms of adding to the availability of housing, which we all support, it just seems, and getting the best standards possible, it seems that sticking with this exemplar process is in everybody's interest. We're not saying, yeah, it's good. And there are some good features. There's concerns that the committee had too. Transport and access is one of them that they're going to need to work on. But even in that respect, I would hope that they can come up with a good transport plan just as part of what they're going to need to achieve. So, and the 6.2 is not agreeing to it in principle, it's qualified. And I think that term is quite significant. So really what we're saying is, look, and it's actually summed up in paragraph 4.6. It's weak in some areas, but further work may yet have the potential for exemplar housing. So it's really, I'd urge councillors not to put restraints on this process at this stage of the process, but to continue to work with the process and to have allow Ngāi Tahu that opportunity.
Can you just go through, and apologies if you've said this and I missed it, but the next stage is, will we get to a point where Ngāi Tahu has to have ticked all the boxes, for want of a better phrase, and the call is made and it comes back to us? Could you just explain that, please?
Well, what we're signalling is the opportunity for us and Ngāi Tahu to sit down and for them to develop theirs further. So they really have, I think, probably two choices from here on. And one is they say, yep, we're prepared to continue to engage in that dialogue. We want to continue to access the exemplar. We've seen the signal from the council and we'll continue to work. At some point, we'd need to come back with a complete package and say, actually, this is the best they've come up with after all this dialogue, and do we still support it?
So that's the problem they
Yep. The alternative for them is to say, actually, no, we don't think that we really want to engage in this, and we'll go back and we'll just seek to use a normal as the Deputy Mayor has outlined, we'll seek to use a normal RMA provision, and we'll put down a subdivision.
I just would ask that these get put separate, and just that you all put 6.2. I just want to make several points. One is we're not just about building lots of houses. I think one of the really important things as we redevelop as a city is to be building communities. And when you look at the criteria that this doesn't meet, I would be, more than happy to trade off the energy efficiency, density, and the locality for affordability, diversity, innovation, livability, and community. So to me, the exemplar things that we should be trading off are not the ones that are being put up. And I feel that, this is really just an intensive use of land on a Riccarton Racecourse site, which has its own special status. And it just seems to me that this is the very thing we should be trying to avoid. If we want exemplar developments that build communities and build housing, and if we want to help people fast track through the planning processes and want to put in place financial incentives, then they have to be exemplar, and they have to do a lot more than what's being approved in 6.2. So I see no reason why we can't continue to work with Ngāi Tahu and with the people that are putting this project up. I think we should be really clear. I mean, I don't think it gets much more damning than the panel finding, and I think the last thing we want is to encourage something, even if it's qualified and in principle, that actually doesn't meet some of the core elements of what exemplar projects are. So I can't support 6.2. I think, this was done on the 8th of October, so there's been plenty of time for things to have been done since, and I'm not prepared to take the leap of faith that we've been asked to take. So, I just urge that we think about. I think this idea of approving things in principle is quite dangerous. It actually becomes incredibly hard to move back from things once you've approved them in principle, and I'd rather have the certainty before we agree to it. So I can't support this. It does look like just a, bog standard subdivision or intensification, and I just think that, the key aspects that we want are not here, and we should actually not worry about missing the deadline. Final point I'd make is deadlines have been missed all over the place in terms of this recovery. There are a number of deadlines that just won't be met because of whatever circumstance. I don't think that's a rationale for approving something in qualified principle to go forward.
I'm happy to do what councillors ask and take 6.2 separately. Can you just clarify for me the consequences of 6.1, 3 and 4 passing without 6.2?
Yeah, I suppose 6.2 is around the signal that we send back to the Crown as part of our obligations under the LERP, where we're required to report back on those exemplar projects. So really, effectively, 6.2 basically, I suppose, in some respects sends two messages. One, it says to Ngāi Tahu, these are the areas where we think you've first passed ticked the box, and as a consequence, those are the other areas where you really need to do some work on. But it also says to the Crown, in terms of the holistic exemplar process going forward, we think there's still a live project here for us to work on.
Okay, thank you. And even if we don't approve it, they can go ahead with it as a standard subdivision under the RMA?
Yes, they could through the district plan review simply get a rezoning to probably living one. And
can I just clarify the point about community facilities within any subdivision? I'm assuming now that within any approval of any subdivision, things like a coffee shop and those sorts of things that bring people together are fairly standard? Or does that require the changes in the current district plan?
I don't know, sorry, and I'm probably just extending beyond my sort of detailed knowledge of the plan provisions, but in some respects it's a question of scale and in terms of what the opportunities I think are certainly there. for
No,
that
it's
to
not
happen.
the opportunities, it's
No,
the
it's
actual
the
coffee shop.
requirements, and I can't comment on those at this stage.
Okay, Glenn and then Andrew.
Thank you. I remember one of our exemplars involved a two-step process, so I just wanted to check that in fact this is a kind of an iterative thing with this, that it actually does come back to the council before we...
Yes,
It does.
It will need to
All
come
good.
back to the council.
Yep, okay.
More work needs to be done. By approving the recommendations today, we're sending a signal to the developer that we believe that more work can be done, if indeed they choose to do that, for this to be considered as an exemplar. So the qualified approval in principle is sending that signal to the developer today that, that we do want this to proceed to exemplar status, if indeed that's possible. It may be, it may not be, but in passing these recommendations today, we recognise that we have a need for quality and quantity of housing to be delivered quickly. The whole exemplar status would, if it was achieved, bring a good outcome for that site. If it's not achieved, then we would be looking at a regular standard subdivision. My belief is that the exemplar is what we should be working to, and that's the reason I'll be supporting this today, to give it the best possible chance of proceeding in that way.
Thank you. Can I put then 6.1, 6.3 and 6.4, and then I'll put 6.2 separately, okay? Yep, yep.
If they decided just to go it alone outside of the loop, and they'd be in an L1 development, is that what you said?
Oh, well, sorry, I mean, that would be, L1 is the sort of the general living zone that's around it. It would probably be an LG under the new district plan. But it would certainly allow, well, certainly provide for a lower level of density than that what they're currently offering or proposing in this plan at the moment.
So that's my point, that they'd be reluctant to do that, I would say. They'd prefer to do the higher density. And by not pressing this point about the exemplar, are we letting them off the hook a bit?
Well, I think we actually are doing the opposite. We are pressing the exemplar. We are actually encouraging them to stay into the process. And I would probably comment that, in fact, developers generally would prefer to do lower density. The areas where they struggle the most is where they're doing higher density. So anything that actually comes with a comprehensive view of higher density is something that, as a city, we should be encouraging.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
So I'm going to put it, and I'll put it in two parts, okay? So I'm going to put 6.1, 6.3, 6.4. Those in favour of those, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Carried. And then 6.2, which would need to go back into the same order that it was in, moved Councillors Turner and Clearwater. Can I put that? Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Declare it carried with Pauline and Yanni voting against. Is that right? Okay, thank you. So the whole motion is carried.